so page 104 in your science. So we're moving on to our new chapter this week, which is enjoying science investigation.
Hey, I did not ask you to put it. I'll put it right here.
Pull your chair back, please. Okay, so page 104, enjoying science investigation. So we finished our chapter on on insects last week and the life cycle of insects. So this week, put on to our next chapter. We'll do that for this week and next week, science investigation. It's talking about the different things about sciences. Yeah. All right. So let's get started on page 104, enjoying science investigation. Dennis, you want to start us off on 104? Okay.
Scientists are always learning more about the world God made, whether it is something so small that can only be seen with a microscope or something so far away that can only be studied with a telescope. Scientists are always investigating what makes people want to investigate science. When God designed and created us, He gave us curious minds. Our minds are able to learn new things. God wants us to use our minds to discover and study more about His creation. This is what scientists do: investigate God's creation. God wants us to use His creation wisely. Scientists are often able to help others with their new discoveries.
Okay, good. So scientists, their job is to always do research to learn more about the different things that are in the world, the different things that God made. So they use different tools like microscopes, telescopes, magnifying glasses. They use so many different tools that help them in their investigations to figure out all of these different things. And so when they want to figure out these things, it's called investigating. They're like researching, trying to dig deeper to figure out why something works the way that it works. A lot of things already we know about because of scientists, someone who looked at something and said, I want to figure out how this works. And they did. And that's how we usually get a lot of information, because someone took time to study a certain thing. And that's a scientist. 105. How scientists work. Let's talk about their process, which is called the scientific method. The scientific method is a step-by-step process that they go through in order to figure out something that they want to investigate. So let's talk about that. All right, 105, Joshua, the top part.
How scientists work. Scientists are very careful workers. They learn and investigate the same way we learn in science class. God allows world to a step-by-step process called the scientific method. The scientific method.
Okay, so you can stop there. So like I said, scientists investigate and learn about things by going through a step-by-step process, which is called the scientific method. There's 4 steps, and we'll talk about those in a second, that the scientists go through to figure it out. Okay, so let's look at the first one. First thing they do. Avaya?
Scientific methods. Scientists begin by watching or observing what they want to learn more about.
Read the number 1. The number 1.
Number 1. Scientists observe and ask questions. Scientists begin by watching
or observing what they want to learn more about. Then they ask questions that could lead to new discoveries.
Good. So the first thing scientists will do is they will observe and ask questions. So if a scientist, for example, wants to know the process of a plant growing, the first thing they'll do is they'll watch it, they'll observe it. Then they start to ask questions and say, okay, what does the plant need to do this? Or how do you have to plant the seed? So they ask questions because if they want to figure out how something works, they have to ask questions about it. So that's the first thing they do. They watch and observe, and then they ask questions to figure out why something is the way that it is. Okay, 2, Kinley. Okay, 2.
Scientists guess and predict. Scientists make new guesses about how or why something will happen. They make a prediction like this: if I try this, I believe certain things will happen.
Anything again? Good. All right, thank you. So the second thing scientists guess and predict. So scientists, once they start to observe and ask questions, they will then begin to guess and predict possibly why something is happening the way that it's happening. They make a prediction and they say, I think this is happening because of this, right? But does that make it final? And does that make it right because they're guessing? No, a guess is not right. So this is not it. They have more things they do to make sure they get the actual facts. Okay, so let's go to 3 on that, on this page, on 6. All right, 3, what's the third thing that they'll do?
Scientists experience and gather data. Guess, however, are not science fact. That is the way scientists try to prove their guesses are correct. They design fair experiments to test their guesses are sometimes predictions. Sometimes they guess are right, but sometimes they are wrong. A scientist they write down what they are observing and learning. That this is called data.
Data.
All right, so not only do scientists guess and predict, but then what they do is they start to dig data. So what they'll do is they will set up different experiments. So like, for example, we said, like say if a scientist is trying to figure out what soil grows plants the best, they'll probably do an experiment where they may have like 4 different types of soil and they'll plant a seed in each one and they'll watch it over time and they're gathering their data, our data, same thing. They're gathering what they need to know. They'll say, okay, with soil A, the plant didn't grow that fast. With soil B, the plant did grow fast. That's how they figure out how things work. They will plant, they'll do different experiments, figure it out, and then they collect their data information, write it down to figure out, okay, this doesn't work, this works. That's how they figure it out. All right, 4. What do they do after they collect the information in the experiments? This is right there. You wasn't paying attention because you were doing whatever you were doing.
Power. Guess power. Science.
Or on that other page. Number 4.
Science can control. They can. No. Science can prove their guess is their data. Matches their prediction. Sometimes a science may have a strong guess or prediction about things, but they are still able. Often, science must try many experience before they can find a new science idea or authority. Science shows science must try many experiences before they can do new studies. Science shares that they have learned with others mistakes. More information helps science to do their job.
Okay. So after scientists will gather their data and they will collect the information that they need by their experience and experiments. They will then study it and share it. Once they study it, they realize this is the answer. This is how we share their data. That's how we get information on a lot of things. Because scientists, they took time, and sometimes it can be years that a scientist is studying a certain thing. Sometimes it can be months, it can be weeks, it can be years, even before they're able to discuss to say, oh, we discovered this. So it takes a lot of time, a lot of thought, and they have to be sure that they're correct before they can share it. So this is the scientific method. This is how scientists will study information. First thing they do is they observe and ask questions. That will set up part 2, where so they start to guess and predict, okay, well, if this happens, then this will happen. Then they do experiments and they collect their information from their experiments. And then finally they study it, making sure it's all correct, and then they will share it. Okay? All right, so let's go to 108. Sorry, not 108, 110, and let's talk about where scientists work, because scientists work in different places. Because a lot of scientists, they study in several different places. All scientists don't study in a lab. That's what some people think, but they are in different places. Okay. got yours? But yes, so scientists don't always study in labs. They can sometimes study in several different places. Like we learned about the rainforest and the savannah. The scientists took time to study there. That's why we were able to learn all the information we did about those habitats because the scientists went there, studied there, and then brought and shared the information with us. So all scientists don't work in the lab. Some of them will work in the place that they're studying. Okay, let's talk about some of the tools that scientists use on 111. Carson?
Scientists use certain tools as they work. Some of these are tools we use in science class. A pencil and paper is what we use to write what we are learning. A hand learning helps us see little things more closely. It makes an object look bigger to us. A microscope helps us investigate tiny things. A telescope helps us see things very far away in space.
No. Scientists will use different types of tools, of course, that help them with their work. Of course, we know they need a pen and a paper to write, of course. A hand lens, they need to look at something closely. A microscope, which helps them to investigate tiny things, like some scientists investigate like bacteria and things like that. And then we have a telescope where those who are astronomers, they study like space and the moon and the sun, all of those different things. So it just depends on what they're studying. They will need a tool. Let's talk about some more. Who? On 112, let's talk about some more. Dennis, that's you on 112.
A ruler helps us measure how long something is. A scale shows how much something weighs. A beaker helps us measure something liquid. A thermometer helps us measure temperature. A timer or stopwatch can count down time. A clock can also help us measure time.
Okay, so they also use a ruler, of course, to help them measure the length of things, a scale to weigh things, a beaker, which helps them measure liquid, thermometer, of course, the temperature, if they're trying to time something like the cheetah, that's why they know how fast the cheetah can run, because they studied that and they took a timer to time it. Right? Okay, 113, science safety. Joshua.
Huh?
Page 113, science safety.
With science safety. When a scientist
That name you, tell me. This one is
when a scientist is learning about unknown things, he must be careful. Some tools and materials can be dangerous if not handled correctly. Safe scientists wash hands before starting an experiment or handling matters. Wear goggles to protect your eyes. Never taste scientist materials or put them near your nose or mouth. Do not run near science to or type experiments. Clean up after every experiment. Wash your hands after you finish with an experiment or handle matter. or matters.
Okay. Okay, so of course, scientists have to make sure that they are safe with all of the experiments and things that they'll be doing. So they do have their tools and their materials, but they have to make sure that they are using them the correct way so that they're safe in their studies. So it's good to know to wash your hands before doing experiments or handling materials, just because you want to have clean hands, wear goggles, protect your eyes, don't taste any of the things, Yeah, and so it's good to just be safe whenever you do a lot of experiments, okay? All right, so that's it, guys, this week on our science. We're learning about scientists and their process to figure out things, to study and investigate. They go through the scientific method. They also have tools that they use. Some of the scientists will actually go to the places that they are studying to figure out the information. They share it, and that's how we learn about a lot of different things. That's how this whole book we're able to learn, because scientists studied and shared this information. Okay, all right, so that's it for our science. Let's go ahead and go to your social studies, page 125, 125, 125 in your science, social studies. Avaya, put your screen on. Yes. So what do you want me to do about that? No. Okay. Yes. You can't do anything because I have not heard you. Yes, I have to go print them. Social studies, guys, page 125. 1 second. All right, page 125 in your social studies. So last time we were in our social studies book, we discussed cattle ranching, right? Remember, as the railroad was built, this allowed a lot of people to travel from east to west a lot easier. This also started the business of cattle ranching, being able to get animals that were in the west to the other side of the world in the east. Well, not the world, but the other side of America in the east. And so cattle ranchers were people who decided to capture cattle, which are cows. They would capture cattle and they would start their own ranch with their cows. So remember, they would round up a bunch of the cows, get the cows, as many as they wanted. They would brand the cows to let everyone know that that cow belonged to them. They would brand the cow, and everyone knew that the cow belonged to whatever rancher it was. They would often hire cowboys to take care of the cattle. The cowboys would be the ones that would keep the cattle safe, make sure the cattle were protected, make sure that no one would take the cattle as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about their business of getting the cattle from the west to the east. Like, how would they do this? They would do what's called a cattle drive. And during that cattle drive, the cowboys were very important. And they also had to make sure they did this part right so that the animals would be brought to the east easily. Okay, so let's look at 125. I think that's you, Avaya. Who I read last? Joshua? Yeah. All right, Avaya.
Cattle drives. Not many towns in the West have railroads. The towns that did have railroads took to take the cows to the east were called cow towns. Dodge City, Kansas
Kansas,
was a famous cow town, a rancher would hire a cowboy to drive the cattle to a cow town. How long did it take to drive the cattle from a ranch to a cow town? It usually took about 4 months for four
Yeah,
months.
it's like 4 months. Yeah, 4 months. Yeah.
The cowboys would see nothing but each other and, of course, calves. The cattle they looked after were called longhorns. Can't you see why?
Okay. All right. So the cattle drive. So that's what they would often do. They would go on what was called a cattle drive. And the cattle drive was the journey they would take from getting the cows out of the land and bringing them all the way to the east. That's what they would do. So during this time, there were a lot of cow towns that kind of sprung up. And why it was called a cow town was because this town was known for having a lot of cows. And usually if you wanted to buy cows or get meat or any of that from a cow, you would go to those cow towns. So the cow towns, that's where they would usually bring the cows to different cow towns, different things like that. And so Dodge City, Kansas was one of the most famous cow towns at that time. And so what the rancher would do is he would hire the cowboys to drive the cattle to a cow town. And they would usually sell them. So it was a business. They would make money, bringing the cows and selling them and different things like that. So a cattle drive would usually take about 4 months, getting the cows from the west all the way to a cow town in the east. What are you doing? Nothing? 1 second.
Miss Flugence?
What you said, Avari? I didn't hear.
Miss Flugence, can you show us pictures of a longhorn? Different pictures?
Yeah, I can do it tomorrow for tomorrow's lesson, but that is a picture example on the book right there. But yeah, I can do it for tomorrow's lesson so I can have it prepared. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it would take about 4 months for them to get the cows from one side to the other. It often took a while for them to do it. 4 months to be exact. It would take them to get the cows from the west to a cow town. And so these cows were called longhorns, as you could see why. They have really extremely long horns. Okay, 126, Kinley. Oh, they're gonna be the same.
Oh, this look like this. The rancher who owned the cattle would travel with the cowboys for the next 4 months. The rancher also hired a cook, drove a chuck wagon, a kitchen on wheels. The cowboys would take bacon. The cowboys ate bacon, beans, and bread almost every day. Of course, there was always plenty of coffee and beef steak. The cowboys rode all day, which meant their horses would need break. So each cowboy usually took 3 horses with him. While he was riding one horse, the other 2 horses would be the other two horses would be resting. The rancher would also hire a man called a wrangler. It was the wrangler's job to look after the extra horses.
Okay. So the rancher who owned the cattle, he would travel with them as well, but remember it was the cowboy's job to take care of the cattle. They would also have a cook who drove a chuck wagon, and it was a kitchen on wheels, so he would often like cook, you know, they would eat bacon, beans, bread almost every day. And of course they had enough meat, right? They have cows, so they would have all the steak that they wanted as well. So the rancher would often take, again, the cowboys with him, a cook who would drive the chuck wagon, which was a kitchen. So they would have everything they need. Because remember, it's not like if we travel today, right? We can stop anywhere and get something to eat, right? Wasn't like that at that time. They had to basically provide their own food, and that's what they would do. So the cowboys would ride all day on their horses, and they would usually take like 3 horses because it was such a long journey. And they would have to give their horses breaks. So they would usually take like 3 horses with them. And they had somebody that was hired to take care of the horses. And that was a wrangler. So the cowboys took care of the cattle. The wranglers took care of the horses. So, yeah. All right, let's talk about a roundup on 127. So how would they get all that cattle to follow them to the east?
A real cowboy loves his job. One year through was a sedan in a street. The cattle became senseless and were dangerous. What could sometimes a sudden sound like thunder before a storm would startle the cattle. Sometimes the person's voice could do it. If one of the cows started running, the other ones would too. After 4 months of long, hard days of driving cattle, you can be sure the cowboys were glad to ride into a cow town, where they sold the cattle and put them on a train to the east. Some cowboys, but not as many as the days of cow towns and cattle drive railroads were built, cities were found, and fences were around the land once used for cattle. Driving through America's West has challenged. One thing is certain, the America West forever changes America.
Okay. So a roundup. So the cowboy, how he would round up the cows means he would get them all together as a group. Okay. They would often keep, as you can see on the picture, they will put them together in a group. But the cowboys had to make sure though that they kept the cows safe in the roundup. They didn't want a stampede. A stampede could be something very dangerous. A stampede is when all the cows would, you know, like if something would scare them, they would just all start running. And if you're not careful enough, these are big, large animals and they can knock you over and, you know, trample, right? And so cows get startled pretty easily. So it was a lot of different things that could scare them. It could be thunder, you know, it could be somebody talking, someone just suddenly speaking, anything like that. And usually it could start a stampede. So the cowboys had to make sure that they kept the cows safe and protected at all times to avoid things like a stampede as well. Okay. And so, excuse me. So that's how they would usually travel west. So once they arrived in a cow town, there would usually be a train where they were able to load the cows on the train, and the train would then take the cows to the east where they needed to go and things like that. Okay. So you had different cities that were built at that time. Railroad helped out a lot with that. The job of the cowboy was just to get the cow to a cow town so they could get them on the train. Okay. All right. So that's it. So that's how they would do a cattle drive, getting the cows from east, bringing them to the west. Okay. That's it. That's it for social studies. No, we don't have it today. That's it. Yeah. Yeah, because we did reading and we did language writing. All right, guys. So that's it. No, we don't do that on Tuesday. Okay. Y'all have a good day, guys. I just wanted to go over our science and social studies today. We finished language earlier, so we don't need to do that now. And then no math today. We'll cover math on tomorrow. All right. So y'all finish all your assignments. That's the time for you today. Y'all have a good day. I'll see you tomorrow for Bible. Uh-huh.